I've done an England 100-Year War guide on nearly every patch, so I can say with certainty that England on the current patch is the easiest it has ever been to win the 100-Year War. It's so easy, it actively feels like cheating. So let's begin. There's a few things we want to do before the war. None of them are particularly vital, but we'll go through them anyway. The first thing we're going to do with our government reform is we're going to pick the diplomatic traditions government reform. It's not vital, but it is helpful. We do have a rival we can hand out. It doesn't really matter who we hand it out to. I prefer to just hand it out to a minor Irish tribe. They're likely to get killed in the first few years anyway, so we'll receive that back. For research, it doesn't matter because we're actually going to win so fast, we're not going to have time to research much. But I pretty much always go for Universal Christianity for that little 0.05 diplomats, and then the guilds. And by the time we've done that, Renaissance should be available. Next, we're also going to hand out a few privileges. There are two societal values we really want to push as England. The first is naval, obviously. The second is communalism. As England, we start with negative communalism. By that, of course, I mean we start with individualism. Individualism, it's not as good as communalism. And of course, as England, naval is very important to us because we are an island nation. Getting control on the continent is going to be very awkward without using naval governors. So I recommend handing out every privilege related to it, handing out noble navies to increase naval, handing out religious administration and strengthen the faith for 0.3 push towards communalism. Once you've done all that, we'll just slap the clergy to give us a little bit of legitimacy. We could also slap the peasantry for an extra 20 stability, but I prefer to not do that, at least just yet. Another option we can take is slapping the burghers for a little bit of income. It's better to hold off on this though, because the amount of money you get is based on the income of the burghers. So the longer things go on, the more money you'll get. But you can slap them immediately. It's a 5-year cooldown, so you can just slap them, get that money, and then come back in 5 years. So I think we'll do that. For our cabinet seats, there's two things we want to do. We want to push naval or communalism, depending on your preference. I'm going to be pushing for naval. We'll put the best possible person we can in charge of that. And then for our second one, we're going to go for diplomatic endeavours. We'll also put our king in charge of our navy in order to increase our push towards naval. You can see we're going up to 31. We want to reach that 50 so that we can grab harbour administrations. It's very good, even if we discount the naval governor, because it reduces the cost of control as it passes through ports, which can become quite costly. We can see here we're losing 13 control from it passing through London to the Thames. So anything we can do to decrease that cost will be great for a naval-focused nation like England. For our economy, you'll look at it and say we're losing a lot of money, but that is all largely due to trade expenses, and once a few days have ticked, the game will correct all of this for us. But I would still recommend turning down army maintenance, as having high maintenance for your army will stop our push towards naval, while getting rid of it will keep the push. I would also advocate demolishing most of your forts. You really don't need them, especially the minor stockades scattered around the UK. If you're really feeling scared to get rid of all of your forts, I guess you could keep the two that are bordering Scotland and maybe the one in Dover, but I don't have those fears, so I'll get rid of all of them. We'll keep the one in London because it's always good to have a fort in your capital. For our diplomats, we're going to be focused quite a lot on trying to get French vassals to flip. Before we start doing that, let me just tell you that a French vassal cannot defect to England if they're ruled by the same dynasty as the French ruler. So if we look at Normandy, for example, they're ruled by the same dynasty, so they will never defect. But there's a little more to it than that. Not only can the ruler not be a member of the French ruling dynasty, the successor can't either. One of the actions France has is to place a member of their dynasty as the successor to certain countries. They tend to do this very aggressively with Brittany, meaning we usually can't get Brittany to a defect. We're going to start increasing relationship with them anyway, as well as Flanders and Burgundy. If Brittany defects, that's great, but if not, we won't lose any sleep over it. We'll keep an eye on their succession to see if France does place a member of their family as the successor. Finally, it may be worth dropping your cost of court and letting the legitimacy tick down, at least in the short term. We're going to need to do a bit of diplomatic spending to achieve our goals. But with all that said, I think we're ready to unpause. Here's the start of the 100-Year War. France demands Sir Robert will of course say no, which would cause the 100-Year War to start at the end of the month. There we go. Now that the 100 Years War started, well, let's keep an eye on Brittany. And yep, we can see France has immediately placed a member of their family as the successor, so we'll stop improving relationships with them. It's impossible for us to gain them as a... One thing to do is keep an eye out for an independence movement against the French, This can be very annoying. One thing you can do is try and improve relationships so that the leader of the revolt defects to you instead of declaring independence from the French. It's a little bit of a long shot. I haven't always been able to do it. Sometimes the independence war can't really be stopped. It is a nuisance though. So if you can get them to defect to you, which will dissolve the independence movement, I really recommend trying to do so. Here's our first defectee. I'll try and keep count. This is Flanders. You may be worried that these vassals are going to be very rebellious, but their rebelliousness is largely due to the liberty desire from events that they receive from defecting. This is going to decay quite rapidly though, at one point every 2 months. So you really shouldn't need to worry about it. They'll very quickly shave off their rebelliousness. Here's our second defectee, and here's our third, and here's our fourth, and here's our fifth, and here's our sixth, and here's our seventh, and here's France declaring war on us. So here's what's important. Because France is declaring war on us, and their vassals are very disloyal, France is essentially attacking us alone. It is only France attacking us. Whereas we are, of course, coming to war with ourselves and all of our vassals, including the ones who have recently defected. With that in mind, we're going to go over to the nobles and ask them for emergency levies. We could call up a parliament, an emergency one, and use that to get even more levies, but I truly don't think we need to. We'll wait a few days, and that's our 9th defection, I think, and that's our 10th, but we'll call up our levies. We'll begin ferrying our army over to France. That's our 11, I think. Keep in mind, if nations defect to you while you're at war, they won't immediately join the war, which is kind of beneficial because your vassals are likely going to go around and get stomped on by the French, which isn't helpful. But unfortunately, there's nothing you can really do to stop it. That's our 11th, maybe 12th, and that's our 13th. Always good to see Burgundy joining the correct side. If you're really feeling like you know it's scary fighting France, one thing you can do is, because we're the defender, we can request war entry. So you can go to someone like Castile and say, I'll give you 200 ducats to join the war on my side. I don't think you need to, but we're going to do it just so I can show it off. Castile says, sure bro, they take our 200 ducats, they join this war on our side. We'll begin ferrying our army over to France. Because France is likely going to rack up war score quite rapidly from fighting all our vassals, one thing we want to do is really just catch the French army and destroy them. Doing so is easier said than done though, due to the large amount of French forts. This is the 14th defectee, I believe. So let's just see if we can't grab any of the French armies that are roaming around, like that one there. That's pretty good stack wipe. We'll trust the Castilians can do things in the south of the country, so we'll focus on trying to catch French armies here in the north. There's our 15th, I think. It's really hard keeping count. There's just so many of them. And there's our 16th. Again, I'm having trouble keeping track. And there, I think we just stack wiped a lot of the French army. Yep, that was actually the army that had their regulars. So now France is pretty much done. We can freely just go around and occupy them as we please. So now we can think about what exactly we want from the war. We of course want to take French land. That really goes without saying, right? Personally, I quite like taking the northern French territory plus Paris and then just handing out a lot of territory to Aquitaine. Aquitaine has cores on large swathes of French land, so we can just return those cores to them for very cheap on antagonism. We could, if we were really feeling greedy, just eat all of northern France almost, but the antagonism for doing so is going to be very high. If you're feeling confident, you definitely can. Since Aquitaine has cores, just giving them all their land back just feels appropriate, right? And there's the 16th, maybe 15th defectee. At this point, France is so weak, we're just going to call in anyone that defects to us immediately. There's no reason to delay having them join. To be fair, we don't really need them at this point. And there's the 17th, maybe? I mean, France isn't really much of a nation left at this point. They've lost all their vassals. The only ones that are really going to stay loyal are these northern ones, because they simply can't defect to us, sadly. And there's the 18th. Maybe I should have been writing this down as we were going instead of just trying to keep count naturally. And there's the 18th. We're actually going to have so many vassals that it's hard for us to really keep them under control, but it shouldn't be too bad. I can see there, though, unfortunately, the independence revolt has revolted. This is unfortunate. It would have been preferable for them not to revolt, because now the French states that haven't joined our war will join the side of France in the war, so they can no longer defect to us. To be fair, nearly everyone that can defect has defect to us. If we look at the French vassals right now, and let's take into account both the rebels and the loyalists, only 14 of them by my count can actually defect to us at this point, and a lot of them are very small. We don't particularly care about these very small states, these one location miners in southern France defecting to us. Really, everyone that is important has already defected or can't defect. The only one I would say who hasn't defected who we might have liked is Bar here, but it is what it is. France has capitulated, so now we can make peace. There's no reason to continue the war further. As I talked about earlier, we could take vast swathes of northern France. All of this could be taken. Unfortunately, we can't take this bit of land because, ironically, this is not within France. If we look at the map mode, it's over in the Low Countries and so is not able to be taken. You could take this very large piece of land. If you're comfortable dealing with the antagonism and or you're not scared of a coalition, then definitely you could take this much land. Or, as I said, you could do the other option and give lots of land to Aquitaine while taking a more modest bit of land in northern France. Unfortunately, we can't go through with the claim throne action because Paradox has changed it so that we now need a larger economic base than France has wealth, I think it is. And it's very hard for us to do that. We can see our economic base here right now is only 237 ducats. So it's very hard to do, almost impossible, I think, in this first war, simply because of the large amount of land that France has, which is increasing their wealth. But to be honest, I actually think it's not worth taking the French throne in this situation, because we're going to be able to essentially kill them almost entirely. Since most of their vassals have defected to us, and we're going to be taking northern France, France kind of loses its value as a personal union. So let's take this. I guess we'll take a bit of money from them as well. Always nice to get some money. The question, of course, becomes what should we do with this large swathe of territory now? I personally advocate releasing dominions here. If you really want to, you could release a really big Champagne vassal to manage most of it, and then a Picard vassal to manage the rest. But personally, I prefer to release custom subjects. If we release dominions, because dominions share our culture, they will convert the land to English. Also, because dominions are a separate subject type, they won't increase their rebelliousness based on the amount of vassals or fiefdoms we have. And as you can imagine, we've gained a lot of vassals from the French vassals switching over to us and becoming vassals themselves. So spreading out the amount of vassal types we have is a good idea. It might be tempting to keep hold of this land for yourself, but it's going to be very awkward to get control in it. You'll need to get a naval governor, which is something we're pushing towards by pushing our naval modifier, but the place you can actually build a naval governor are rather limited. If we look at location rank, there's currently only 2 locations we could build a naval governor in. Both are controlled by our vassals. So we'll need to integrate them first or create our own city somewhere along the coast. But as I said, we don't own many locations ourselves, we only control these 2. So with all of that said, I do advocate just releasing a bunch of dominions to manage the territory for you. They will of course pay you tax. You'll receive a fair amount of tax from them, specifically your Paris dominion, who will, as you can imagine, make quite a lot of money and then pay that to you. They'll also help by converting the land over to English culture once they call their territories, making way for the correct rulers of France. You may find you still have quite a few rebellious vassals. Again, I wouldn't really worry about this. Their liberty desire is largely caused due to the event that caused them to defect. One thing I do kind of advocate though is once we've won this initial war and got everyone we really want to defect, we should switch out from diplomatic traditions over to feudal nobility, just to make our vassals even more loyal and to give us a little bit of noble satisfaction equilibrium, which is always an excellent modifier. It might also be a good idea to keep your naval levies raised even after the war ends, because your push to naval will be increased based on the size of your navy, and that includes these naval levies. The naval levies will of course also help with pushing maritime presence, which is probably what you want to spend your navy doing after the war, or even during it. For now though, I think we're going to leave the video here. France is really destroyed. It's only a matter of time until we fully annex them or subjugate them. We control 149 of the locations in France that we need to end the situation. My recommendation is, in your next war with France, try to make it so you only take enough that you're on 174. That way you can fight one more war after that using the 100-year war CB and take the max amount of land you can do. That is, of course, unless you've decided you want to subjugate France using the enforced union, which you may be able to do depending on how far down French wealth has fallen. We can see here from looking in the ledger, French wealth has fallen down to 364, which still isn't really enough for us to surpass them with our economic base, but it's a lot closer now. But either way, I do hope this video is helpful to you, that you can mimic this strategy or adapt it and use it as your own. Do let me know what you think of the strategy, whether you've done it yourself, whether you're going to adopt it, whether you have your own strategy. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. I'll thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.